If that intro got you as excited as it did for me, hit that like button right now and let's get down to it. I have been speculating for a while now that Elgato would announce a webcam in 2021, and since learning it would be a reality, this has been one of the hardest secrets to keep, especially considering I've been doing a lot of webcam videos recently. In case you missed it, today Elgato announced the release of this little guy, the Elgato Facecam, which is their first ever webcam. It retails at $200 here in the US, $260 in Canada, and lucky for you, I've had the last couple weeks to test the crap out of this webcam to figure out who should and who should not buy this webcam. So let's start with the outside of this webcam and we'll work our way into the software that comes with Facecam, which is honestly where a lot of the magic comes in. The first thing you will notice out of the box is that this webcam is kind of big, especially when you compare it to some of the more common webcams on the market, like the Logitech C920. The crazy part is that the Facecam is just 96 grams, which makes it 40% lighter than the C920. It comes with a roughly 6.5 foot long USB-C cable connector that requires a USB 3 port, and just like the included monitor mount, it is detachable from the webcam. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of positioning your webcam. And like many webcams have today, there's a privacy cap that it's included that you can just pop on and off, but let's be real, you're gonna lose that within a week and never see it again. The actual lens features a 2.4 aperture and focal length of 24 millimeters, which gives you an 82-degree field of view. If that went over your head, it's a good lens. That lens, however, does not shoot in 4K, but rather pumps out an uncompressed 1080p resolution at 60 frames per second. Before I go any further, let's actually jump over to the Facecam so that you can take a look at what this webcam footage actually looks like. This is the Elgato Facecam, and I gotta say, I like how it looks. We are shooting at 1080p, 60 frames per second right now. You can see we've got that nice field of view, 82 degrees, which is great for you streamers who want to have a little bit more of a widescreen look like you see on some other streams. Now, one thing to note about this webcam, it does not use autofocus, nor does it have the ability to do manual focus. It has a fixed focus lens. So to illustrate what that is, basically anything within a certain range of depth, it's going to have a really good picture on. So it's built for a desk setup. So the ideal ranges are anything from 30 centimeters to 120 centimeters. Anything within that range will look really good. And you know, for you Americans who want inches, anything beyond 12 inches, but before 47 inches, so that's like 3.5, almost 4 feet back. Anything within that range is gonna look good. So the beauty of fixed focus, the reason I'm a fan of fixed focus lenses is if you're holding a product up, it looks pretty good already. You didn't have any, back and forth or any stuttering. And if I go forward, it still looks good. It doesn't, I mean, there's the lighting right there, which is, I have a bright light on it, but it doesn't have to go in and out and like stutter and try to find it. So that is where I think the fixed focus lens is a big pro of the Elgato Facecam. Now, another thing to note is there is no microphone built into the camera. I'm obviously using the Elgato Wave 3, which is a fantastic mic, my favorite USB one by far. But the reason they did this, it was very intentional. They don't believe streamers and content creators should be using microphones. If they threw one in there, they knew it would be garbage, it would take up space, it adds to the cost, which would likely be passed on to the consumer. So, maybe you could make an argument for microphones in this, but the fact that they are designing these for creators and streamers leaves little reason to include a microphone, whereas other webcam companies are going for a more broad audience. Elgato's not going for that audience. So if you get this planning on having a microphone, you're gonna be disappointed. Now, the biggest criticism you're going to hear about the Facecam is its lack of 4K support. And there's a lot of room to make that criticism, and I think it's a fair criticism, considering that its two biggest competitors which are probably the AverMedia Streamer Cam and the Logitech Brio, both advertise 4K resolution. Granted, it's at 30 frames per second, not 60 frames per second. And they're also in the same ballpark in terms of price as the Elgato Facecam. There's two things you gotta consider with this argument. First off, if you're using this for streaming, your streams are more than likely gonna be compressed right down to 1080p. Especially if you're on Twitch, you're probably gonna see more likely 720p depending on what type of account you have with Twitch. So very rarely are people streaming in 4K, and very commonly people don't want to watch a 4K stream, especially if they're on mobile, because there's often more buffering associated with that. The second thing you've got to consider here is that with the Elgato Facecam, it's the first webcam ever to give you control over ISO levels. This is huge. Aperture, shutter speed, ISO. These are terms that we typically talk about when we're talking about DSLR and mirrorless cameras. Now we're talking about these things with a webcam, and that is where Camera Hub comes in, which is the software that is provided with this webcam. The magic really comes together with Camera Hub. Let's hop over to that and let me show you around. All right, so here it is, Camera Hub. This is the app that lets you really fine tune your webcam. And I should also mention that the Elgato Facecam is the first webcam that comes with built-in flash memory. What that means is that you can actually save your camera settings, not just to the software and to your computer, but it actually saves to the hardware. So I can, take this camera and plug it into the PC behind me, and it will keep all the settings that I've already fine-tuned for this webcam to that, so I don't need to reconfigure it. I've even uninstalled and wiped all of the files of Camera Hub, and I then reinstalled Camera Hub, and it retained all of my settings. So it does work. The other thing to note is that Camera Hub can support multiple face cams. Right up here, you'll just go ahead and select which face cam you want to optimize. I have obviously not tested this because I only have one face cam, and Elgato has clarified in terms of how many face cams can it support. Theoretically, there is no limit, so as long as you can actually plug all of them into your computer and your computer is powerful enough to handle multiple face cams at once. All right, so now let's take a look at the actual image settings to see what we can do. Obviously, you've got your zoom/field of view. We're gonna go ahead and leave that on the widest setting possible. And then you've got, a lot of your typical settings that you see on webcam software, your contrast, your saturation. We can go super high or super low for a black and white look. And you can make it super sharp looking where it almost looks like some sort of Instagram filter, or the opposite, very, very not sharp, and it also kind of looks like a filter. Now at any time I can hit this little refresh button there, and it sets it not to the factory reset, it resets it not back to the factory settings, but it resets it to the latest profile that I saved to the actual Facecam hardware. So that's one thing that's very important to know. If you do want to reset it to the factory settings, you can do that anytime right here. So let's go ahead and restore factory defaults and see if we can build this out together. Already you're gonna think, this looks familiar. This looks like many other webcams that I plug in, and I look super washed out. Obviously I've got the lights. It's an Elgato ring light behind the Facecam that is lighting me up, and I've got it on, I think, the brightest setting, so that is not helping me right now. But this again is where the magic of adjusting your ISO level comes into play. I've rarely found a situation in all of my testing where the default exposure is a great picture. It is a $200 picture. So you're gonna wanna go ahead and disable this. And initially it might look bad, that's fine. But the goal is you wanna get, in general, you wanna get your ISO as low as possible for the bet. You want low ISO and high light. In general, that is, you don't want it the opposite way where you have very low light and then you're having to go super high on your ISO because you're gonna start to see all that grain and you're just not gonna get a great picture here. So in this case, because I have such a bright light behind the camera, I'm all the way down at the lowest ISO. sorry, I keep saying ISO, but we can even maybe pick that up a little bit if we wanted to. Maybe something around like 125. Let's stick with that. And then you've got your shutter speed. Now, the key here, you don't want anything lower than the 64. The reason is because if you go down to 32 or anything down below, you start to lose out, or you actually not start to, you lose out on 60 frames per second. So that's where the frame rate starts to drop. And as I go down to stuff like, here I am at 8, and then all the way down to 4, terrible frames per second. So you want to make sure that you're at 64. There are settings where I have a ton of light and I've been able to get also a good picture at 125. In this case, it's too dark in here for that, but these are probably the two most common ones that you would be using here. Sorry, this is turning into a tutorial here, but this is just really fascinating what you can do with this webcam. And then you've got white balance. I honestly, again, most of the time I have not liked the white balance that it automatically assigns. So again, this webcam is made for enthusiasts who really want to embrace the mechanical elements of the webcam and really fine tune that picture. And then the last thing is the processing / noise reduction. Almost always you're gonna want to, if you start to notice a lot of grain or something like that and you can't get it out, you could turn that on. But in general, you're always gonna keep this off. So I'm gonna go ahead and save these new settings as my new default here. And what I wanna quickly do is open up the window here. We do have a rainstorm going on, unfortunately, so it's not as bright as it could be in this room, but it'll give you a better idea of how does this camera perform in daylight. And there we are, we got daylight now. It looks great. I actually haven't adjusted any of the settings, either on Camera Hub or with my lighting, and it looks pretty good. I can play around with this. Obviously, I can change the temperature around and figure out what works. I've noticed that 5,000 tends to be pretty good for my skin to give a very realistic look here. Again, we can play with the ISO, and I keep saying ISO, sorry, the ISO and all of that, but it looks good. In fact, maybe we're gonna go a little bit lower since we have, in fact, I'm gonna go all the way down to 100 now that we have some more natural light in here. So this is a great picture for daytime. Let's also see what it looks like if we turn off the lighting behind the webcam. So this is the webcam with no light behind it. Obviously it doesn't look wonderful. That's really no surprise here, but just in case you were wondering what it looks like, certainly we can either see if the automatic exposure improves it. That does, but let's go back, and I'm all about manually adjusting. Like seriously, if you're spending 200 bucks for a webcam, you're gonna be doing everything manually here to really fine tune it to your situation. So that's a little taste of the actual image quality of the Facecam. Now it wouldn't be an Elgato product without some sort of integration with the Stream Deck. Elgato does have a plugin available that lets you control some of the basic image configurations of your Facecam. So if you needed to touch up your picture on the fly while streaming, or maybe have some preset levels ready to go, that can all be configured in the Camera Hub plugin on Stream Deck. My big complaint right now is that the Stream Deck plugin for the Facecam does not have any option to adjust the ISO levels, which is arguably the biggest factor over your image quality. Now, I did contact Elgato about this, and they said that this is something that is on their radar, and they do anticipate the ability to save multiple profiles to your camera in Camera Hub. And if they did that, naturally, I would imagine there's going to be an integration with Stream Deck that lets you just, funnel through different presets. That would mainly be valuable if you have settings where you're in a dark room and then you know that maybe during the day you want to use your Facecam for Zoom calls or whatever. You're going to have different ISO levels and all that kind of stuff. The most notable integration is the ability to set zoom levels for your camera. You'll see streams where the streamer will hit a button and suddenly the camera is super close to their face. This is usually done for like a comedic effect. Well, for that to happen, what the streamer usually does is in their OBS, they set two scenes, and the second scene is the same webcam, it's just stretched out to give the illusion that it's zoomed in, and then they just switch back to the original scene, which has the camera at its normal level. Well, because the Camera Hub plugin allows you to control your actual camera, you can control the zoom level from Stream Deck, which means you don't need to switch scenes. You can just stay within your current scene and the button will go to whatever preset zoom level that you establish. Nothing crazy, but I anticipate that the Stream Deck integration is only going to get stronger now that they have released it. The same with Camera Hub. What I would love to see is the ability to blur your background to give it a more DSLR type look. Now, you can accomplish this if you have NVIDIA Broadcast, but keep in mind that in order to use that app, which by the way is totally free, you have to have an RTX graphics card, and I'll link to the software below for the full list of requirements. But you can see here that by applying a blur to my Facecam, I'm able to get a similar look to a DSLR, which is pretty cool. So that's a look at the $200 Elgato Facecam. Certainly cheaper than, your typical mirrorless or DSLR camera, but it's a big jump from the $50 to $100 that people are used to paying for webcams. This camera is definitely designed for the enthusiast. If you're looking for a webcam to make your Zoom calls look a little bit better, this will certainly do it, but you're gonna be overpaying for that use case. However, if you are a streamer who wants a permanent camera for your stream because you're sick of taking down either your phone or your DSLR camera, then this is a great buy if you already have good, solid lighting in place. If you don't already have some sort of way to control both the brightness and temperature of your current lighting setup, whether that be through an Elgato lighting product or others, don't get this webcam until you have that worked out, because you're just gonna spend $200 on this and you're not gonna get the full value of the webcam without that good lighting. So those are my thoughts on the Elgato Facecam. I wanna know, however, what do you think about this webcam? And is it something that's going on your wish list? Have you already purchased it? And if you're watching this later on and you've already got it and used it, let me know what your experience has been. And once again, if this video was helpful to you, it would mean a lot if you hit that like button. Until next time, my name is Brandon Hassler, and this is Tech Audit TV.